Welcome to this edition of the Imagery International podcast series. We hope you find it interesting. ImageryInternational.org.
Welcome. Today is July 3rd, 2013, and this is Leah Bales, Program Director of Imagery International. I'm so delighted today to be interviewing Dr. Carl Hendel on magic, mysticism, and imagery. Before we get started, I'm going to give you contact information, and I'll give it again to you at the very end of the interview. To connect with Imagery International, go to imageryinternational.org. To reach Carl Hendel, email him at carl@drcarl.org. And to reach me, you can go to my website, leahbales.com. I first met Carl many years ago at a conference for the Academy of Guided Imagery. Carl was presenting a fabulous workshop on Tai Chi, and I've had the great pleasure of getting to know him at many conferences since. Carl has the avid curiosity of a child, the intellect of a scientist, and the wisdom of a spiritual teacher. Carl Hendel is a medical doctor who has practiced integrative medicine in Santa Rosa, California for over 20 years. A former anesthesiologist, his study of mind-body medicine was initiated through a personal healing path. Carl has studied Chinese medicine in China and cultivated skills in manual medicine, behavioral medicine, with special interest in hypnosis and interactive imagery. He has studied and taught Tai Chi for over 2 decades and integrates all of these, hypnosis, integrative imagery, manual medicine, behavioral medicine, and Tai Chi, into his work. Carl is also an avid Argentine tango addict, and as he says, a hack cowboy singer, although I've heard him sing, and I would say he's a pretty darn good singer. He is currently semi-retired and seeing only a handful of people he's been working with for many years. Carl was one of the founders of Imagery International, as well as the recipient of the first award for Imagery Person of the Year. Carl will be a featured presenter at the upcoming Imagery International Conference in Burlingame, California, October 4th through 6th. Carl, welcome.
Hi, Leah. Glad to be here.
So glad you're here. Say, Carl, you mentioned in your bio that you started using integrative medicine as part of a personal healing process. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I was going through life in my early 40s as a very active anesthesiologist, and I was struck with an unusual illness, still not really clearly understood, but it ended up with major surgery and removing of my pericardium and the prognosis, which was uncertain to say the best. And my life changed. And life-changing events usually have with them some wonderful aspects, not just the bad. And some of the wonderful aspects was that I began looking at other ways of healing, such as acupuncture. That's the period when I discovered imagery. That's the period when I went to China to study. All of these things came about in my pursuit of re-exploring what it means to heal from more than just the medical model.
What would you say is different about what you think of as healing from this perspective than from a more, perhaps, conventional medical model?
Oh, boy. Magic.
Mm.
I would
How do
say
you mean
that right now we're in a very sad period in Western medicine. Even though the discoveries are enormous, the distortions from the pharmaceutical industry and the profit motive and all of those kinds of things have corrupted the database. And basically, as patients, we're sort of part of an algorithm. Whereas when we are working with levels of healing, very often we are working at deeper levels that are basically the content of the talk on magic and mysticism and imagery.
Mm-hmm. So how did you start using imagery particularly for yourself and in your medical practice?
In the process of the transition from being a Western medical anesthesia specialist professor kind of guy to becoming what a lot of folks would think is a pretty strange application of all of that medical education, doing this kind of stuff. In the process of doing a transition, I was working with a psychiatrist at the time who was frustrated by me. And he said, "You need a vacation," and he tossed down a brochure on the table. He said, "Go take a vacation and take it off your taxes." So that was an Academy for Guided Imagery meeting. So I went to Hawaii and got bit. I mean, the bug, once you get the imagery bug, once you realize there's more going on than just what we experience in what I will refer to later as the first level of reality. When we move beyond that, that's a pretty wonderful door-opening experience for some. I refer to myself as a recovering scientist.
So you went for a vacation and you found imagery and it changed your life.
I'd say we could. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Wow. So how did it then, especially when you were beginning to integrate it, how did imagery enhance your work as a doctor?
Well, I gave up my work as a doctor for a couple of years. And then after finishing the imagery training and after having the experience with acupuncture, I decided that I would try to work with acupuncture and imagery together to see, for example, if I opened up points on the heart meridian or opened up what we might refer to as the crown chakra, that if I did that, would that deepen the potential of imagery? So I started experimenting. And the experiments grew because a lot of the folks I was doing acupuncture and imagery with also would benefit tremendously from working with in their body. So I began to do
Carl. I didn't know that. So you would be using the needles for acupuncture, and you would at the same time be guiding them through an imagery experience?
Yeah, you bet. And I don't know whether it helped or didn't help, but it was interesting, and it was just part of the path. And I still do a lot of my imagery with needles in.
That's great. And so in that 2-year period when you weren't being a doctor and you were just studying imagery, were you using it a lot for yourself?
Yeah, to a certain degree. I'm better at helping other people than myself, but I think that goes for all of us who do this kind of work. If we only practice what we preach, we'd probably be better off. I do a fair amount, though. I would have to say that, especially with the shingles, I've been doing a lot of inner work and a lot of imagery around healing and so forth. So once you have it as a tool, it's always there.
So for listeners, I'm just going to insert Carl right now is dealing with a case of shingles, and so he's having a lot of opportunity to use the imagery right now for himself. Do you have any stories from your early times or just things that occur to you, either with yourself or other people, that began happening that made you think, wow, this is really working?
Yeah. Again, the way that magic works is that there seems to be an influence on the course of events, that when you start doing imagery with yourself or with people, and when they truly engage in the process. I'm not talking about the folks who come in and do an imagery session and then no homework, but those that truly apply themselves, they get better. If they don't get better, in terms of curing, they get better in terms of healing. In other words, the spiritual unfoldment, the acceptance of a chronic condition or whatever. You see through the use of imagery that you are influencing the course of events. And in the definition of magic, they would say by using mysterious or supernatural forces. And mysterious, it's pretty darn mysterious that we can close our eyes and take a few breaths and end up in a different level of reality. And in that level, we can change things. And that change manifests on this first level, this time, space, physical level of reality. That's magic.
Oh, that's great. And that's what you're going to be talking about. So the conference is about imagery and magic, the magic of imagery. And your particular topic at the conference is magic, mysticism, and imagery. And I love that you've started to define that for us, magic and mysticism. Can you say some more about that, how you define them and how they do relate to imagery?
Yeah, well, the definition for magic, I'll stick with what we said earlier and draw attention to the word supernatural, and we'll come back to that. Now, fakery. Fakery is like card tricks, illusion, sham, counterfeit. That's not magic. What we do as imagery practitioners, I believe, is real magic. I like to think of magic as something that we don't understand yet. I remember when Rachel Naomi Remman gave a talk one time, and she emphasized the word yet. And what a powerful word. And I've come to truly understand that, and I still thank her for that gem. Magic is something we don't understand yet. Now, mysticism has a whole different set of words.
I just want to stop you just there a second. That's so great. I love that you've separated fakery, because I think sometimes people think of magic as like pulling something out of a hat. It's illusion that we're doing. Yeah. And so that you're calling fakery. And that's not what we're talking about with this. You're talking about something much more real, and yet you say we don't understand it yet. So there's that sense of mystery and wonder in that. So even though we don't understand it, we can use it. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. How much of what really matters in the world is independent of how much we understand about how it works. It just does. If we only stay with using that which we fully understand, we are living in a two-dimensional universe, and the universe is much bigger than that, way beyond 3, even 4 dimensions. So why limit ourselves? I like to think of knowledge as a very big sphere, but the scientifically proven piece of that is a small part of the whole sphere. So we don't scientifically understand everything in the sphere of knowledge. The problem with the scientific information is that it's like a semi-permeable membrane. So stuff goes in and out of it, and things that were scientifically true yesterday may not be true tomorrow.
So many of these other practices, including imagery that you use, open you and your patients up, or clients, open them up to more of that sphere of knowledge than just... Yes, basically when you go into the trance state, as we do when we do imagery, or when we do meditation, or when we do journey work, when we do those things, we're almost, to paraphrase one of my teachers, Hank Wesselman, we're double-clicking the mouse. The hardware is there. There's a door that can be opened that takes us beyond this experience of time and space into a dream level. And it's in the dream level that we do our imagery. That's fabulous. Thank you, Carl. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
And I think when I interrupted you, you were about to say a little more about mysticism. So you've defined magic and mysticism.
And I don't want to get locked into the definitions, because when I was preparing the talk, I searched the internet and found lots and lots of different definitions. So I extracted from them to come up with ones that worked for me.
Great. So we won't lock you in. Yeah.
Well, no, because these things, I think we need to just see them as related concepts. Mysticism, as I'm defining it for my talk in October, spiritual intuition of truth. Notice the word spiritual and intuition that transcend ordinary understanding. And again, let's come back to that idea of transcending ordinary understanding. That's part of what we were talking about, moving from one level to another level, ordinary understanding being this first level, and we're transcending that. We're opening that door to deeper levels of experience. Others think of a mystical experience as being an intimate union, a direct experience, a connection of the soul with God or source or whatever words you choose through the process of contemplation or ecstasy, or what I would say meditation or imagery. So the key words here are transcending ordinary understanding and spiritual intuitions. And those, I think if we talk further, we might have more to say about what I have in mind with those words.
Fabulous. Yes, that's wonderful. So you mentioned the word spiritual and soul.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that?
Well, let's talk a little bit about soul, because I realize there's a lot of folks that are more in the atheistic camp that deny the existence of the soul. And I'm not even sure where certain aspects of Zen come down on the soul. But I like to think that we have a soul, and that comes out of one of the most important messages that I can give people. And that is that our true teacher is direct experience. It's not what other people have told us is true. It's what we directly experience. And after all of these years, I've come to say that I've directly experienced my soul, and I think we all have one, and I also think my dog has one, so there. Rudolf Steiner talked about soul senses, and I liked that, because we have eyes, ears, nose, we can taste and touch and all that stuff on that same first level of reality. But when we open that door, we're really counting on our soul to help guide us, to help give us a roadmap. And the soul senses that Steiner talked about were imagination, think about that, imagery, intuition, and that comes back to that earlier definition of how do we intuit on a spiritual level what's true. And then how do we know that it's true? And Steiner would say there'd be like this gonging bell that would go off, which would give a sense of inspiration. So with imagination, intuition, and inspiration as soul senses, we're ready to begin looking a little further at the way the soul may be assembled. I'm going to borrow a lot. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Carl, I think that you're talking about these things, and they're a little bit abstract, but at the same time, I'm hearing you say they're also very practical, because if people have a way they can tap into that direct connection with inspiration and intuition and that deep knowing, then that has very practical aspects, doesn't it?
It can change lives. That's why it's magic.
Great. Thank you.
A lot more about the soul has come out of traditional people's systems of belief and religion around the world, be they Native American, be they Celtic and Christian mysticism, be they Hawaiian mysticism. And one of my primary teachers, Hank Wesselman, has given a structure around the Hawaiian, what would I say, the belief system. It's more than that. Hank was fortunate to come into connection with an elder kahuna named Hale Makua. And Makua's teachings had a lot to say about the soul and how we function here. And he actually talked about 3 levels of soul. He talked about that little seed of spirit that comes in when we breathe. And in the Hawaiian culture, aloha, ha is the breath of life. And that when we take our first breath, we get seeded with what people refer to as the after soul, the highest part of ourselves. That joins the body soul, that part of us that has an autonomic nervous system that is governed by an energy level, so to speak. And when the spirit soul and the body soul connect at that first breath, the result is the mental or the astral aspect of ourselves, the decision maker or the chooser for where we go and the path that we take through life, again, on that first level of reality. So when I think of the soul, I like to think of the soul senses, and I like to think of how it's arranged to help us navigate through the life experience.
Wow. I know at the conference you're going to be doing some practical exercises that are going to help people really feel in their own lives and experiences some of these concepts. Is that right?
We're going to do an exercise that I hope is an incredibly wonderful one. And most of the session, I hope, is going to be on the actual experiential process. And yet you brought up a word, concept. When we do our journey work, be it in imagery, in the academy language, we would call it insight, when we're actually in the experience, it's very important to separate what Hank refers to as percepts and concepts. Our work when we journey is to pay attention and listen. What do we perceive? Not trying to interpret, but what is it that we perceive? If we ask a powerful question and then wait and listen for our teachers or our guides to give us an answer, what do we perceive? So we have to be sure that we're aware of the difference between perceptions and conception.
Wonderful. That's fabulous. So some of what we're talking about right now may sound a little abstract or conceptual, and you're going to, at the conference, lead people, and you said even most of your time is going to be leading people through an exercise that's going to take them deeply into their own felt experience and their own, what did you call it, the perception? What was the word you used instead of concept?
Percepts and concepts.
So they'll have a direct experience of that with you at the conference. I think that's going to be fabulous.
And I think also that when we come to the words we referred to earlier, we talked about transcending ordinary reality. Well, that means that there's extraordinary. And we have the word supernatural. It means super, and natural means that there's more than just this physical plane, and that nature is bigger than just the simple experience of getting up in the morning and eating our breakfast and going to work and so on, that the cosmos is bigger. And the question is, and the experience that I hope to be able to engender, and actually the experience you engender every time you guide a person in imagery, is bridging between this first level, this time-space reality, the one that's bound by linear time, for example, and the axiom that you're separate from me. That level and bridging to the rest of the cosmos. That's what we do, is bridge between this level and the dream level.
That's very exciting. And I really want people to know when they're listening to this that when you come to the conference in October and Carl leads you in this, you'll feel that bridge between this reality and that Carl says, the bigger aspect of nature beyond the daily, and be able to have a direct experience of that will relate to your own life. So yeah. I'm very excited. Carl, I think it's going to be fabulous to have you presenting that and creating that experience for people.
Did you know?
I can't believe that we're close to the end of our time, Carl. I could talk to you about this for hours, and I look forward again to being able to talk to you more. Is there anything, before we wrap up, is there anything about your presentation that we haven't mentioned that you just want people to know about today?
Yeah, I want everybody who attends the conference, and we are going to do a collective journey. We're going to bridge, and we're going to do a collective journey and debrief it collectively. And I was just wanting to mention that the word shaman means bridge.
Wow. So even someone who has no shamanic experience that they know of or that they call that will be able to have an experience of that bridging.
We're going to double-click that hard drive. We're going to go into the dream level, of the middle world of dream, and we're going to explore what it is that each of us can do. And it's going to be a collective, powerful experience that could be life-changing.
That sounds really, really fabulous. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Wow. So for people thinking about coming to the conference, Carl, I mean, you've been to so many of them. Have you been to all of the Imagery International conferences? You've been to many of them, and I know before that even started, you'd gone to many of the conferences for the Academy for Guided Imagery. What would you say to people? What are the 2 or 3 top things you would want people to know about the conference? If people are thinking about signing up, what would you want them to know about them?
I would say the most recurring element is that at the end of the conference, none of us want to go, that we've made connections. And those connections are meaningful. And when we do our closing circle, I've never been to any conference where we just didn't have the sense of what a special time we had sharing with each other. That's one thing. And I would say that also folks tend, I would say, take your pre-existing concepts, pack them in a suitcase, and leave the suitcase home, and come open to the possibility of new ideas and new experiences.
Yes, and I would say we could pretty much guarantee they're going to have some of those, definitely.
Well,
thank you so much, Carl.
You're welcome.
The registration is open now for the Imagery International Conference. It will be in Burlingame, California, October 4th through 6th, 2013. And the theme this year is the magic of imagery. To learn more about the conference, to register, or to learn more about the organization, Imagery International, go to the website, imageryinternational.org. And to reach Carl, email him at carl@drcarl.org, and that's Carl with a C. And if you want to reach me, you can go to my website, Leah, L-E-A, Bales, B-A-Y-L-E-S.com, or email me, leah@leahbales.com.
May I make one more comment?
Oh, yeah, please.
On my email, spell out the word doctor, D-O-C-T-O-R, because the abbreviation won't work.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I didn't even think to clarify that. So let's just say it again. It's Carl with a C, and it's carl@drcarl.org. Carl@drcarl.org to email Carl. Thank you. And Carl, I really thank you so much for taking the time to talk today. It's great to talk to you. I look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you all who are listening. I'm wishing you a most magical day.
Thank you for joining this Imagery International podcast. The music in this piece is provided by Shantha Shri. Find out more about our membership benefits, including our quarterly journal, at imageryinternational.org. Thank you for listening.